Struggling parents, this one is for you. In this video, I'm going to give you 5 top tips that will help you get your life back on track and have some peace and quiet. Parents, I know it can be tough at times juggling work and kids and everything in between, but that's why I'm here to help. In this video, I'm going to give you 5 top tips that will help you get your life back on track and have some peace and quiet. So grab a cup of coffee or cocoa and let's get started. Tip number 1, peace comes from being a credible parent. Having credibility is so important that I've actually created an entire course on this. Credibility means your kids believe you. They know you mean what you say. You can be counted on. You're reliable. It involves boundaries and limits and expectations and structure and discipline. Let me define credibility by telling you a true story about what credibility isn't. This occurred many years ago. I was a young psychologist just a couple of years into my career, and I was working mostly with kids, teenagers, and their parents. Well, one day I was at a Super Target, which is, if you've ever been to a Super Target, it's just a gigantic store with practically everything you'd ever need. Well, I had just walked in, I was in my own little world, and I heard this loud commotion coming from somewhere in the front of the store, somewhere in the front and on my left. Well, there was this young boy, he's probably 7 or 8 years old, and he had just grabbed something and started running away from his dad. So he's running down this really long aisle, all the way to the end of the store. And I heard his dad say, "Ben, get back here right now." And I mean, he was yelling loudly. I mean, it caught everybody's attention. So here's Dad standing in the middle of the aisle, watching Ben get smaller and smaller and smaller as he's running in the opposite direction. And then Dad says, this is where it gets interesting, "Don't make me count." And when he said that, Ben really showed no sign of slowing down. And so Dad started counting. A little side note, when my mom counted, you were still okay when she got to 1, but you were starting to worry. And when she got to 2, you knew things were about to get pretty bad. If she made it to 3, it was time to run. Okay, it was no joke with her. But back to this Dad. By the time he got to 1, Ben was running comfortably. By the time he got to 2, he picked up his speed a bit. At 3, he was sprinting down the aisle. And this is when it got really interesting. And I am not lying to you. I watched this Dad count all the way to 17. 17 is an interesting number because that's a lot of counting. And I'm certain about one thing, that Ben did not believe a thing his dad said when the counting started. Dad had no credibility at all. That's what I mean by credibility. He was not believable. And because he wasn't credible, there was no way they were going to have a peaceful life. So you have to be credible. Number 2, create and try to be consistent with boundaries. Now, this is really to me, it's the not so fun part of parenting. And when we talk about boundaries and structure, it makes some of us feel guilty because we're not very good at it. But I'll tell you, children absolutely thrive with limits and structure. The way I think of it very simply, boundaries equal happy kids, lack of boundaries equal unhappy kids. So try to create and be consistent with some boundaries. Tip number 3, establish daily rituals of connection in your home. I really think that too much unstructured time for kids is the enemy. It's okay to have some, but too much is the enemy. Kids should never be wondering what they're going to be doing during the day for too long. Let me give you an example of a routine. Mealtime. Did you know that the number 1 predictor of less likely substance abuse in adolescents is actually the number of family meals they have in a week? That statistic blew me away when I first heard it. It just reinforces the idea that there are some boundaries that we can create in the form of family rituals that will both increase our bond with our kids, but at the same time they play a preventative role in risk-taking behaviors like drug and alcohol use. Another routine and ritual is bedtime. We tuck them in, we wake them up. Another is after school, snacks and time to decompress before they do homework. Just having some kind of predictability in your kids' daily life will give both them and you a lot of peace. Tip number 4. Although we have structure and expectations and routines and rituals, remember that sometimes we have to be flexible. Sometimes you have to study a little extra for the quiz that morning and you don't have time to make your bed. We can be flexible and still create patterns of expectations. Before I give you the next tip, number 5, I'd love you to like and subscribe below and add some comments about what you do in your home in the form of rituals that make your home a more peaceful place. My last tip number 5, just remember that the most effective parenting style actually involves being nurturing and being credible. So aside from just having routines and structure and boundaries, try to find ways to be nurturing and emotionally connected with your child. So for example, sometimes little kids act out because they're not getting enough of your attention. My daughter's 2-year-old son was acting out one day. He was just doing all sorts of naughty stuff, and it would have been really easy to scold him or any other number of appropriate interventions for him. But instead, she just sat down with him and read him a story. And for this little boy, that just changed everything in that moment, because all he was wanting was some attention, and that story time was this little emotional bonding reset moment that altered the course of his behaviors. Hey, if you've been struggling with peace in your home like the rest of us, just start with these points. But I have more for you, and I've put a link in the description to a free 4-part presentation that will show you how to connect with your kids and how to have more peace in your home. So grab a pen and paper and click the link below, and I'll see you there. The more you try to control somebody, the less control you have. The less you try to control somebody, the more influence you're likely to have. When you feel like you've tried everything and you still feel disconnected from your child, get creative, meet them where they are, engage in their interests. You'll be surprised how this changes things for your relationship.